Volume 1, Chapter 21. The Scar of Defeat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 14, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. The thick scent of the shed blood permeated the air. I had gone after the main unit, but it was already too late. By the time I had caught up, the hunt had already ended. The damages? I asked, heaving, still out of breath after having sprinted so desperately. The beasts under our command have all been killed. From the main unit, 3 goblins have been killed, replied Gi Go with his head bowed deeply, a hint of apology in his voice. I read wrong, I said. The Grey Wolf wasn't alone. It could have been a pair, I don't know for sure. Regardless, while I was fighting with one of the Grey Wolves at the back, another one attacked the goblins from the front. That's why that Grey Wolf left me so easily. Without putting itself in any more danger than necessary, it took what it needed, and left. Fuck. I cussed to myself, gritting my teeth in frustration. Then exhaling, I asked, is there anyone injured? Only shallow wounds, nothing serious, replied Gi Go. Then let us go. I wish to reach the settlement if even a moment sooner, I declared. In the end, the Grey Wolves never came back, and it became clear that we would eventually reach the settlement safely. But at the same time, there's no doubting that I had lost. And the bitter taste of that defeat remained within my chest. I had lost. To a beast no less. A beast. Anger seethed, and I gritted my teeth in its fervor. This humiliation. I will definitely make you pay for this, you mutts. The red snake coiled around my right arm is itching. I've been restless ever since the day I lost to that Grey Wolf. Even running without rest continuously is unable to exhaust this body. The word, fatigue, had completely vanished from my senses lexicon. The only sensation left, the incessant itching of this red snake. Before I knew it, they had been raging without my behest. Like fire in my brains, scorching its pith, magical energies violently flowed from my body as if it were being wrung out from the very nucleus of this flesh. Where are the enemies? Begged my soul. My eyes ravenously darting as I watched over my horde. Enemy. 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 Give me an enemy, beckoned my soul. Something to kill. Something to cut. A foe. A threat. An enemy, cried every fiber of my being. Is there no one? Is there nothing? Where are you? Those craving, almost wishing thoughts stormed a gale at the back of my mind, driving me into lunacy when the village entered my eyes. To the village. I shouted, ordering the horde to enter. Then I rushed back to the rear end of the horde's line. Come after me, you mutts. I'll kill every single one of you bastards. Guruu. That restless howl left from the pits of my stomach, echoing out loud as I glared viciously towards the path we had come from. Then from my back, a voice entered my ears. King, it said. It was the old goblin. A king. King. Right. I'm a king. A king. Me. 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 A king. I am a king. By forcefully invocating the skill, you are able to resist against the urges attacking you. I want to swing my arm. I want to release this never-ending gush of magical energy. Destroy everything you see. Crush them. Break them. Kill them. Kill every single one of them. Kill. 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 Oh. At that bellowing roar gushing forth from the inner pits of my stomach, I struck iron second into the earth. Silence. I commanded within my mind. Gritting my teeth, I focused all of my strength, and activated the skill. Then the old goblin spoke again. "King," it asked. "Are you done evacuating?" I asked back, at the same time wondering whether my voice was shaking or not. "Yes, without any problems," replied the old goblin. "I see. I want to be alone for a moment. Don't let anyone near me." "Yes." The old goblin left, while I remained. I didn't move one bit from that spot until I had managed to calm down the Go's horde of goblins that were injured were able to reach the settlement safely. This settlement still has plenty of room left, but thinking that if I don't do something I'll end up remembering that loss again, I decided to go mark the boundaries between the different areas in the settlement. At the center is an open space where the goblins are to have their meals. Some stones have been piled up in the center of that open space, serving as a fireplace. Then north of that open space is the dwelling place of the prisoners. Then east of that is the king's, my house. I then decided to let the goblins that have evolved into goblin rares live near me, while the other goblins are to be situated around the open square, following the fence. I decided on this arrangement in order to make it easy to distinguish who is close to the king and who is not, as well as to make giving out orders quick and easy. As for the non-combatant goblins, I gave them the area west of the goblin rare's dwelling. The horde of goblins that Go was leading, even after being reduced by the Grey Wolves, raised our numbers by 45. Although that's for both combatants and non-combatants, having that many goblins added to our number would still definitely cause friction. So in order to avoid that, I arranged them in this way. After that a day passed since returning to the village. There are now 92 goblins in total, but the goblins are too weak. I handed the thin ones over to Gu, while I thought up of a countermeasure for the Grey Wolves. We are, after all, only a day's distance away from a number of powerful beasts. While they won't be able to destroy the village in one raid, they could certainly prove to be a hindrance in our hunts. But really it's just that I can't stay put unless I do something. For the meantime, I ordered my subordinates to spread their hunting grounds towards the west and the east. From what I know there are at least 2 Grey Wolves. I need to think something up quick. I walked while thinking, and before I knew it, I found myself in front of the shed where Reshia was being kept captive. You, cooed someone, or something. That voice sounds familiar. Knitting my eyebrows, I looked for the source of that voice. And when I found it, I saw the kobold from before being fed by Reshia. Suddenly, the kobold turned around, and then it wagged its fluttery tail vigorously. Reshia threw it a bone, and the kobold chewed on that as if it were in heaven. With it looking completely intoxicated like that, it's really no different from a dog. The shed Reshia's using was originally meant for domestic animals, so it's easy to see what's going on from outside. It's not even locked. Really, the only thing that's guaranteeing their safety is my word. While thinking that, I noticed the kobold staring at me as it wagged its tail. In the next instant, it ran towards me, and played at my feet. But despite that, it didn't let go of its bone once. What a glutton. Skill, has activated. Oops, I guess stared too much. Race, kobold, level, 9, class, puppy, possessed skills, divine protection, none, attributes, none, master, enslaved to a goblin dukem. I suppose to laugh that all it can do is literally eat. Looking at this guy is kind of exhausting. All that anger is slowly seeping away, sigh. As I breathed out a deep sigh, a voice called out from inside the shed. Are you back? Yeah, although we didn't come back unscathed. Having calmed down to some degree, I entered the prisoner's shed. A bit cranky today, aren't you? I asked. To which the goblin in front of me responded with a smile as if deriding itself. I lost some of my subordinates. Even though I dared call myself king, it's unsightly. In other words, you're depressed. Even though you're a monster. Ever since I was acknowledged by the goddess of healing, Zenobia, and received her divine protection, I've been given a number of special privileges. The best education, exemption from taxes in different countries, preferential treatment should I enter a guild, and more. One of the things I've been taught is the ability to see through lies. No matter who it is or what it is, as long as they possess intelligence, what they're thinking will definitely show in their eyes. This is knowledge I received from humanity's highest institute of education, the ivory tower. And just as I've been taught, I gazed into the goblin's eyes, but it's not wavering. It's common sense in human society that monsters are nothing but brutal, egoistical creatures. Feelings of camaraderie don't exist. They are slaves to their lusts, and would attack all humans as their instincts would dictate. And yet, what is this goblin? Ever since I've been caught by this goblin's done nothing but topple all of my common sense, shocking me time and time again. That time when the orcs attacked too. Even though it's obvious that goblins are far weaker than orcs, and yet it still purposely went to oppose them. On top of that, it actually asked for its comrades to be healed first before it. For it to have that kind of nobility. His visage when he proclaimed himself a king. If only he were human, then he would surely be remembered as a wise king for generations to come, forever preserved within the annals of history. There's no doubting it. Feudal lords frantically scrambling amongst themselves for land while they ignore the people. The royal families that would ensnare even their own kin to protect their own position. The officials that know only to feather their own nest. The commoners who would betray even their closest friends for a little gold. And that unsightly mess of a church for what should be a guide to God. Why? Why won't people be a little kinder? I hated the capital's atmosphere, that's why I had hoped to work at a church somewhere near the borders. For a moment, I held on to the hope that as long as the atmosphere's different, then even the people would act differently. As a follower of Zenobia, I would save those who have been abducted, but instead I was driven into the forest of darkness. And now, for some reason, there is a goblin in front of me who is calling itself the King of Goblins. The change in the environment was a bit much, so I was pessimistic at first. But lately I've started to get used to it. On top of that, the goblin in front of me doesn't act like a goblin at all. A goblin's a goblin, but for some reason, this one stinks of being human. I can feel it, in its behavior, in its words. I can feel traces of complex emotions. Even though I was taught that goblins are simple. Even though my experiences proved that to be true. Even though goblins were supposed to be monsters that could do nothing else but live their lives, slaves to their desires as filthy, gluttonous beasts. These goblins took that common sense, and turned it upside down. And in the short time I've stayed here, I couldn't help but find them to be more human than humans. Yet despite that, I am human. If they were to fight against the humans, I wouldn't be able to stand with them. So please, I prayed. Don't fight with the humans. I am dreaming. I know this because I know it to be so. A dream wherein a sword-wielding maiden is facing against a monster. The monster is towering, they are not equals. But the brave woman minded that not, and she opposed the crafty beast with her sword in hand. The maiden had with her neither the craftiness to outwit, nor the strength to stall. The one thing she possessed was her courage. Her brandished sword was proof of that, though her breath found itself tottering. Ah, I thought. She's going to lose. The ferocious, mighty beast pitted against a frail maiden, who would believe otherwise? Yet the woman showed no signs of retreat, her steps, not faltering even once. The maiden walked. And a howl that could swallow both heaven and earth erupted, yet she faltered not. The earth split, she dodged the threat. Slipping through the monster's attack, she opposed the monster with only a sword in hand. And then she reached it. The bosom of the monster wielding a flaming great sword. In the instant that the flaming great sword fell, the monster's face met with mine. It was me. The monster stopped in its tracks. And the maiden's sword pierced into my chest. The flaming sword fell from my hands, and it pierced itself onto the maiden. Then a voice spoke. "This is destiny," it said. "Your destiny, that is." Clicking my tongue, I woke up, jumping from my bed, drenched in cold sweat. In the darkness of the night, the moon and the stars were brightly shining. To think I'd actually have an extraordinary nightmare, enough to make me jump awake, shown to me. Speaking of which, whose voice was that? Destiny. Mine. Ha ha ha, interesting. So you're telling me I'm going to be killed, huh, Destiny? As the two red moons shone brilliantly in the night sky, I stood up, letting the evening wind pass through me. The wind passing through the forest from the lake was a delight to my sweat-drenched body. As I walked, with no direction in particular, I found myself unusually cautious of the rustling trees. I've probably just become too timid, I thought. But paying it no more mind, I continued to walk. Before I knew it, I was once more, in front of Reshia's prison. She's probably sleeping, I thought. I'll know though, since I can see even in the dead of the night with this pair of eyes. I suppose it can be quite convenient. But as I went closer, what reflected on my eyes was Reshia, praying. Praying towards the two crimson moons. "Are you going to curse me now?" I jokingly asked. Her eyes opened slightly, but the expression on her face immediately made me gasp. "Bastard, who are you?" I asked. A resolved face. If it was only that, then it wouldn't matter. No, it wouldn't really be a good thing, but regardless, right now, I can't feel even the slightest hint of life from Reshia's expression. Normally, her face would at least show some displeasure or anger or perhaps sorrow, but right now, there's nothing. A completely blank expression. "Not the sharpest knife, I take it," replied Reshia, or at least that should have had been Reshia's voice, but for some reason, something was different. But exactly what was different I wasn't sure. Her amethyst-colored eyes shot at me. A mere gaze, nothing more, yet my body felt as if it had turned into ice. My body is heavy, and my limbs wouldn't move. This sensation is. Activating the skill, I went against that pressure at full power. But then in the middle of that, a cursed scream suddenly echoed at the back of my mind. "Zenobia!" screamed the voice. Altesia, the goddess of the underworld's scream, eroded whatever control over my body that I had. "I implore thee, to that which must be, and to that which must not, bring unto him peace." The words Reshia recited kept the goddess of the underworld away. Heaving, I fell to my knees. Ignoring the sweat that has gathered on my forehead, Reshia seems to be. "No, we've gone this far, there's no other way but to accept it. The person before me right now is no other than the goddess of healing, Zenobia." "You seem to be suffering," said the goddess. "Thanks to you," I replied, putting on as much of a tough act as I could, but unfortunately, my body wouldn't move. "Why do you rebel so much against destiny?" she asked. "Let me throw that question back to you, why do you accept destiny?" I asked back. I thought I heard her sigh, but as expected, I couldn't tell what she was thinking behind her voice. My elder sister revolted against her destiny to rebel. And again, just now, she opposed me as soon as she saw me. "Don't you think it's foolish?" said the goddess. "Then how about leaving us alone? Me, and even Reshia?" I answered. "The source of your power, the will to rebel, insurgent will, is not infinite. In fact, it is already reaching its limits." As the goddess said that, Reshia's glowing fingers touched my forehead. And I felt heat move from my forehead to my chest. Again. "You won't be able to break free from the saint's charm," declared the goddess. "You wish to trample on my heart again. Who would have thought that being too busy to check my status would actually bite me back like this?" The charm of the goddess I had neglected released a great power that pressed hard against me. "Coo! Goo!" I groaned. I tried to stand up, but I failed, and I fell to my back instead. As if to obstruct the moon up in the sky, Zenobia, who's been hiding Reshia's feelings, looked at me. "It's not really my place to say this, but please take care of this child," said the goddess as she neared me, bringing herself over my chest. "How much longer do you wish to toy with people's feelings?" I yelled. Reshia's glowing finger headed towards me once again. When her finger pierced into my chest, I felt something change within me. A gift from me. "This should release the curse from Si. Said the goddess as her voice slowly faded. Reshia tottered a bit, then finally losing all strength, she fell on my chest. "But you should take care. The more you use magic, the closer you will be to sister," whispered the goddess through Reshia, as she twisted about on top of me. "My sister is also known as the goddess of rebellion. The goddess who rebelled against my father, the goddess of revenge and rebellion. That's why, please, protect this, my beloved daughter." After that, the only thing I could hear was Reshia breathing as she slept. Not long after, I noticed that my arms could move again, and the voice of the goddess of the underworld no longer echoed. I stretched my hands toward the twin crimson moons. "Zenobia. You said that it was foolish of me to rebel against destiny. And you also told me to protect Reshia. But the destiny I saw, aren't you aware of it? The face of the sword wielding maiden. That maiden, she was crying. Reshia was crying. If you're telling me to protect that, then just as I've thought, I don't have a choice but to rebel against you and your brethren. I won't die, and I won't kill Reshia. If that is a revolt against the gods, if that is a rebellion against destiny, then so be it. I shall gladly become a rebel." The effect of the skill has increased. Because of the divine protection of the goddess of healing, Zenobia, the mental attacks of the goddess of the underworld, Altisia, will be suppressed. Author's note. Think the protagonist's mental irregularity is at its peak yet. Volume 1, Chapter 22. The Soul of a King. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 14, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altisia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. 3 days has passed since Go and its horde has come to our village. I had the newcomers form 3-man cells along with the rest of the goblins. At first, they were confused, but after seeing for themselves the effects of using traps, and how it can easily corner prey to secure food, they seem to have appreciated it. The fact that there's no friction is proof of that. I ordered the goblins to focus their hunting on the east and west. At the same time, I warned them not to hurt the kobolds. If we hunt too much, we might just break the barrier that's protecting us from the humans. I also reminded them not to forget my orders to run if they come across any of the orcs coming from the west, or if they happen to meet a giant spider. Of course, they would probably still run even if I hadn't ordered them to. But lately, Gi's been challenging the stronger beasts in the area, so just in case, I made sure that they wouldn't do anything stupid. After I was sure that the goblins could do their rounds around the village well enough, I headed over to the old goblins. Naturally, my objective is to gather information for the next village. My plan won't change, I will still start with the closer villages. "There is someone, but," said the old goblin, slightly hesitating. "But he's a bit dangerous." Those words full of bitterness brought a smile to my face. "Irrelevant. I will make it understand my power," I replied. "I need to make those gray wolves who attacked us pay. For the sake of that goal, I need to gather the strong and not the weak. There is a village of goblins opposite the lake with a group of druids living in it," said the old goblin. "In other words, a village ruled by magic users. From what the old goblin told me, these druids seem to look down on all goblins other than their own class." "Druid, huh?" I muttered. "It's a kind of goblin my village doesn't have. And since he says it's a group of druids, then there should be a number of them there. Even just one of those druids would greatly strengthen my forces if I were to add them. The next prey's been decided then, said. The land they rule is at most about a day's distance. The hesitant, old goblin can just lead us. Getting there safely is important after all. Still, it would be great if I could get a map, but unfortunately such luxuries aren't possible. After all, this forest here is the forbidden forest of darkness. Humans don't come in here. Well, as soon as I walk it, I'll remember the way. Speaking of which, who should I take with me? Gigi has just recently caught some new beasts, and is currently busy, so it won't be possible to take it along. Gi-Go and Gi-Gu on the other hand, have their hands full teaching the new goblins how to hunt. The former leader teaching brings the best results after all. So that leaves Gi-Ga. I yelled. Gi-Ga's been greedily wishing for a fight ever since the orcs' raid, so I decided to have it come with me. By your will, replied Gi-Ga. And so I left the village with Gi-Ga to scout. We know that there's plenty of spear deer to hunt until the lake, so we didn't get lost on the way. Then we got to the lake, we did our reconnaissance by walking around it, observing the surroundings to try and get a grasp on the area, answering questions such as, is there a path a large number of goblins can use? Are any strong monsters? Or conversely, are there any preys that we could hunt easily? Questions like that. When it comes to fighting, the forest is probably better. The druid's magic is worrying too. It's something I haven't fought against yet, so I'm both anxious and excited. Then while I was absorbed deep in my thoughts, Giga called out to me, Chief, it said looking over to Giga, I noticed it pointing its spear towards a direction. Following that, I saw a monster that I have never seen before. As I looked closely at it, the skill activated, and its status came up. Skill has activated. Race, Lizard Man, Level, 10, Class, Larva, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, None, Attributes, None. The monster that lived on the lake roused wariness in me. At that moment, Giga asked me excitedly, Chief, fight, let me, it said. Giga was so eager to fight it was about to jump into the fray, but I stopped it, and continued to observe the lizard man. Then I asked Giga, why? Why are you so eager to fight? To be honest, I really don't understand Giga's feelings. Then Giga replied, I become Chief's strength. Hearing that caused my eyes to open, moving the pair from the lizard man to Giga. Looking at it like this, Giga's as excited as usual. It really isn't one to lie, so. It's telling the truth. I gain power. King, help, it continued. Am I that unreliable? I asked. Giga shook its head, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Looks like it just likes me. Damn it, this is embarrassing. But still. So you're going to follow me, huh? I looked at the lizard man again. With its alligator-like exterior bathed in beach's sunlight, the lizard man actually looked to be quite charming. Only there was a sharp, curved sword in its hand. And on its other hand was a sharp nail extending. And those scales. It doesn't look like it's been cut by a hard blade, so it must be because of the water that there's a part that's somewhat swelling. Is there such a thing? How curious. Then Giga yelled again, trying to hurry me in its excessive excitement. Chief, it said. Giga was panting in excitement. Don't push yourself too much, I said. Giga shook its head up and down so vigorously it made a buzzing sound. Also, I won't lend you a hand, okay? At those words, fighting spirit lit within Giga's eyes. This is the battle Giga desired, so I made sure to make it understand that it should accept the results no matter what it may be. Harsh as this may seem, it is imperative that Giga understand this. The goblins under me. I wonder, will they remain as nothing more than livestock under my rule? Or will they grow into full-fledged warriors? I don't mind either way. You goblins can become livestock for all I care. Your lives are no different from the pigs served on the table. But should you happen to acquire the honor of a warrior, then. At those thoughts, I made my decision that I won't let even a single of you to die meaninglessly. The warriors that once existed in my country. Those brave, gallant figures that I never had the pleasure of seeing. If you can make me feel even a trace of their glory, then you shall become my pride. Even if I come to be called, the king of monsters. Even if I come to be ridiculed, the king of pygmies. I will not abandon you. I will lead you and your people, and I shall raise a new country. To follow me is to walk the path of war. You shall fight foes leagues above you to no rest. So. Go. I yelled, and the goblin rocketed off. And I watched over it silently. This might be a detour, but it's a necessary one. As I told myself that, I gripped iron second tightly. I'm worried about that lizardman's skill. If that's something that could call others of its own kind, then I might have to risk my life. Giga's spear grazed the lizard man's scale, and green blood oozed out. But the lizard man was, by nature, a race above the goblin rare, and it did not falter. Instead it gripped its curved sword tight, and it slashed towards Giga. The thrust spear returned to Giga's hands, and the goblin blocked the curved sword. Supposedly, in a battle between a spear and a sword, the spear should win out in range. However, Giga's excessive fighting spirit caused it to challenge the lizard man in a close fight instead. Not good, I thought. The battle continued, and the lizard man closed in. In a series of attack, the battle-hungry Giga was driven into a corner. Even if Giga blocks one attack, another blow follows right after it. Curved swords were originally made to make cutting easy. The sword flew in a flurry, uncontested, striking from above, from below, from the right and from the left. The lizard man was clearly not just superior in race, but it also made full use of its own advantages. I gritted my teeth, but I wasn't going to join the fray. Just as I had said, this is the battle Giga wished for. So I will only look on, quietly, without lifting a finger. Even if death shall visit you, I will remain still. It doesn't matter whether you're a monster or human. Once a man decides to fight, he must see it to the end. That's what I believe. The blade of the lizard man has finally begun to wound Giga's body gradually. And the goblin's red blood spurted into the air. My brows furrowed, and my glare intensified. So much so that I was certain my looks could kill. And sweat gathered at my palm that tightly gripped iron second. Giga pulled its spear back. And the lizard man's sword came swinging at it. Panicked, the goblin took some distance, and I finally felt a bit of relief. Good, I thought. That's exactly what you should be doing. Take some distance, and fight from there. If you do so, you'll have a chance at winning. From the looks of things, even the lizard man's at a loss at what to do with Giga's spear handling. Giga definitely isn't behind in skill. But the wall Giga needs to overcome is that overwhelming difference in physical abilities. After Giga took some distance, the lizard man immediately tried to close it. At Giga's one-sided defensive battle, my patience began to approach its limits. The lizard man slashed from below upwards, cutting Giga's feet. Red blood spurted out of them, and the curved sword drew a circle as it flashed. But Giga only gripped its own spear again. At the same time, the brandished curved sword swung down. That's not good. As those thoughts exploded within my mind, I rocketed towards the lizard man and Giga. I knew I wouldn't make it, but still. But then all of a sudden, Giga suddenly took a step forward. The descending curved sword cut Giga's shoulder, and more red blood gushed out. TCH, clicked my tongue. Don't die, Giga. But then right at that moment, the bellowing sound of a howl suddenly entered my ears. Gurua. Then Giga put all of its strength into the spear, and thrusted it, leaving me surprised, and the lizard man's eyes, opened wide. The thrusted spear pierced into the lizard man's chest, and blood gushed out a pool of red. Then Giga fell to its knees, and it looked dumbfounded towards the lizard man that took its spear. Gyu. The lizard man shrieked an ear-piercing scream, and then it breathed its last. Giga. I yelled. Chief, I won, said Giga, weakly. Ah, it was a spectacular victory, I replied. Then as if having lost all strength, Giga bowed, and fell to the ground. Quickly, I ran to where he was, and when I got to him, he was deep asleep. I felt relieved from the bottom of my heart when I saw that. I guess even I don't understand my own feelings, I muttered. Gyue, as I held Giga up, I heard something shriek. I left Giga somewhere around the lake, leaving him there to rest, then I looked back. And there, before me, was a lounge of lizard men crawling from the waterside. 5 lizard men. Coming? I asked, my face twisting into a smile. I wielded iron second over my shoulder. I can't lose. Not to 5 lizard men whose power is equal to that of goblin nobles. The gallant figure of the man who said he would become strong for my sake scorched within me. I am the king of that man, the proud king of monsters. Be it Zenobia. Be it Altesia. None shall stand before me. Turn me into a blade, enchant. The abyss. Like flames of darkness clad my sword. And as my heart burned, so did the flames of enchant rage. Level, has risen. 14. 22, skill, has evolved into, skill. Because of having adherents within your horde, magic power up. Every time you gain an adherent, your total magic power will increase. However, each time your magic power increases, so will the ability of the goddess of the underworld to control you increase. Loyalty from subordinate monsters up. Volume 1, Chapter 23. Deformity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 22, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. After taking care of the lizard men, I carried the sleeping Giga back home. I had to stop the reconnaissance of the druid village halfway through, but it's fine since I got something good in exchange. And after a night passed since returning to the village, Giga evolved. Confirming his status with the skill, the class that came up on his status window was a little different from mine. Race, Goblin, Level, 1, Class, Noble, Guardian, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, none, Attributes, none. He has a number of skills I don't have. But by focusing my will, I was able to see the various skill descriptions. Skill, an attack that aims at the foe's vital points. Skill, when fighting near the king, strength, dexterity, and fighting spirit will increase by 10%. Skill, can throw spear from a long distance. Skill, when dueling with someone, stamina and skill proc rate will increase by 10%. Spear throwing and the likes are technique class abilities. It works similarly to swordsmanship. His skill class is basically decked out to peak when fighting near me. As long as I don't misuse his abilities, he could become a huge power in my army. Especially in our coming rematch with the Grey Wolves. A crowd was formed around Giga. Not just because goblin nobles are rare, but also because he looked different. His skin's bluish-black just like my time as a goblin noble, but his arms are completely different from what mine used to be, being long enough to reach even the ground. At the same time though, his body is also smaller than a duke's. So if it's just length we're comparing, mine's longer. A deformity, muttered the old goblin. That's that, but first comes rejoicing. I replied, patting Giga on his shoulders, as I granted him the long spear we got from the orcs. This could prove useful when we go meet the druids. Take it, Giga, I said. Humbling himself, Giga gratefully accepted the spear. Then he said, by this spear, I swear absolute fealty to the king. Oh. His speech has gotten quite smooth. So this is also one of the benefits of evolution. After that I went out again to scout the lake's path. Going around the lake, and then going north of it, I passed by the lands of the lizard men, and reached the north area of the lake. The atmosphere of that place was different. The ceaseless cries of the wind played with the scraggy rocks, resounding a tune that took the whole land. Its lands were barren despite being inside a forest. The few trees that grew in it were at most a man's height. Looks like it's here, I thought. Well then, I should withdraw. Discreetly, I left the lands of the druids, and hurried back to the village. Giga and Giga both managed to ready their respective hoards. It's been a mere 3 days, but plenty of results have been had. I still have some concerns regarding cooperation and leadership, but that can't be helped. I do think it's a bit premature, but I want to deal with the druids quickly, and challenge the grey wolves again. So we'll strike now. Honestly speaking though, I think even in our current state, we're more than good enough to challenge the grey wolves. But doing that will inevitably result in large numbers of casualties. My army's finally starting to gain momentum, decreasing it at this point. That's not exactly the wisest of ideas, is it now? As for the battle against the druids, we'll take them with sheer numbers. They will fall before our overwhelming numbers, and then I'll add them to my army. The old goblin mentioned that the druids looked down on other goblins. To despise means to have emotions close to that of humans. So it might be amongst the druids that I find someone capable of leadership. I went back on the battle with the grey wolves several times, and the conclusion I came to was that our loss was a result of a difference in the number of leaders. That time's defeat was both from my incapability to predict the grey wolves' movement, and my lack of manpower able to oppose the grey wolves. There were other problems as well, but because I was too busy fighting one of the grey wolves, I couldn't lead the horde. Times such as that where I'm unable to lead the horde will definitely come. Who will lead then? And besides, even if I had fought with the grey wolf until the end, I might have not gotten off lightly either. The way I am right now would, at most, lead to a draw. But despite that, I have to win. And for that, I need stronger men. Giga is foolhardy, but Giga and Giga can do things he can't do as well. Giga is currently desperately raising new beasts. What I have to do right now is to strengthen the horde. To add something to the horde that it doesn't have now. A new factor like the druids, for example. According to human, Mattis guidance, we made some smoked fish and meat to prepare for the battle. We didn't just use smoke though, we also used the sun to preserve some of the food. Also, because the armor rabbit apparently had some salt mixed in its blood, we were able to preserve the meat by rubbing that on the meat. Who would have armor rabbit blood could be used in that way? The knowledge of man is really hard to despise after all. There are so many things that even I don't know. And the one race that's been given plenty of opportunity to retain that knowledge is man. In the form of books, by mouth, or even in the form of tales, man is able to preserve a great number of their knowledge. Giga and the rest of the goblins thought Mattis was using magic. They even actually went to ask him whether he could use magic. Of course, Mattis just told them that it's not magic and was just a skill. A reply to which the goblins were utterly dumbfounded. Well, it's not surprising. The techniques that goblins know are mostly destructive after all. The fact that there could be skills that could create instead of destroy, that fact left a deep impression to Giga. Incidentally, I had the man named Chinos make some farmland. Of course, with a bodyguard watching over him. Then under his instructions, we cut trees around the village, and uprooted the stumps, changing the land into one for cultivation. The land's not that big, but it might prove useful. As for Lily, she's in charge of sewing. Using the hide of armor rabbits and the fangs and leather of shape alligators, she's able to make us some nice armor. Lily, being an adventurer, knows much about the vital points to protect, so I left it to her to decide which parts to cover with her armor. But as expected, it would take quite a bit of time to complete. That's most likely a side effect of having her made it to specialize for each individual. As a result, I had no choice but to put it on hold for the meantime. 6 days since G.I. Go's horde has arrived in our village, and 7 days since I embarrassingly lost to the Grey Wolves, I gathered most of the village, and gave out the order to take the north. We shall march for the north, and make the Druids one of us, I declared. G.I.G.A., G.I.G.I., and G.I. Go, you three shall ready your men. G.I. Go, you shall stay to protect our village. Everyone bowed, and I gave out instructions for our formation. Each one of you shall take 10 goblins with him. And I will also do the same, taking 10 goblins under me that I will directly control. Now, G.I. Go, should the kobolds contact you, informing you that the humans have entered the forest, immediately abandon the village, Doviko. Then I showed G.I. Go where to run. Most of our men are coming with me on this expedition. We have to win. Tomorrow, on daybreak, we march. And so, the expedition to take the Druids began. Incidentally, Reshia will also be coming with us, but for some reason, she didn't voice any complaints. Regarding the setting. The goblins currently under the protagonist are Giga, the goblin in that estranged group that was with the protagonist when he defeated an orc. He is currently a noble class, the highest amongst the protagonist's subordinates. He prefers to use the spear. Gi Gu, the former leader of the village. He was pressured by the protagonist in his goblin noble form, and was added to his subordinates. He uses the long sword, and is relatively smart for a goblin rare. Giga, known as a beast warrior, a goblin with the ability to tame beasts. He evolved while hunting spear deer with the protagonist. He prefers to use the axe. The strongest known tamed beast is currently the triple boar, but for the sake of the coming battle with the Grey Wolves, he's raising different beasts. His goblin class is rare. Giga, a goblin with many wounds on his body. The food of his horde was stolen by the Grey Wolves, so he made a decision to follow the protagonist. He is the most experienced amongst the goblin raiders. His weapon is a curved katana. Volume 1, Chapter 24. Duel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 22, Class, Duke, Horde Chiefs, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. Our expedition to the north proceeded smoothly. After a day and a half, we continued to move north of the lake, hunting beasts at our leisure as we progressed. During this time, we didn't encounter any strong beasts. But along the way, I realized that I hadn't taken Reshia's pace into account. Even with a guide, walking these parts of the forest is quite tough for a human, so her pace was quite slow. If we were to continue like this, we would end up taking too much time, so I picked Reshia up, and carried her instead. Immediately she complained, but I ignored her and sped up the army's pace. We'll march till noon, I declared. The crying wind breezed throughout the desolate lands, singing a hymn for all to hear. These winds might have been hailed by the power of magic, I thought. It could be here to show that the Druids rule these lands, but even so, we marched on. From here on, we need to exercise great caution. Under the guidance of the old goblin, I threw Reshia away, and led the horde to proceed cautiously. So this is where the Druids live? I asked to the old goblin. Yes. Ahead is the area where the giant tree absorbing this land's nutrients is. The great heaven-piercing tree, the home of the Druids. According to the old goblin, the Druids dug a cave at the roots of that giant tree, and they created their base there. So that's where they are, I muttered. From a distance stood a great tree that reached the heavens, towering over everything around it. As we gradually neared it, the tree and its surroundings grew fuller. A green lush could be seen spread around the tree, while the roots sprouting up were hugging the nearby rocks. The new trees of the giant tree were being cultivated in that land. It was as if it was trying to create a new forest with nothing but its own kind as it caused an invasion of foliage that extended 30 meters around it. And then out of that tiny forest within this giant forest came out a goblin. It looked over to where we were, then it panicked, and it quickly came back in and called for its friends. Good. It did our job for us, I remarked. Then in order to make them surrender, I ordered the army to be deployed. After all, there's no quicker way than scaring your foe. Gi Go's army of 10 marched to the right, Gi's army of beasts marched to the left, Gi Ga's army of 10 took the rear of the tree, while I took the front. Like this we surrounded the giant tree of this small forest. I stood there quietly, waiting. Wondering to myself how the opposing goblins will come out, when the old goblin suddenly came over. "O king, please hear my request," he said. "What?" I curtly replied, my eyes remaining fixed on the giant tree. "Please let me be the one to demand their surrender." "What?" The old goblin assertively bowed his head toward me. A complete change from that old goblin that fervently contested going here. "Why?" I asked. "It's difficult to say, but the leader of druids is most likely my son," replied the old goblin, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "You would demand their surrender? Even though it's your own blood and kin? I've never heard of a goblin having emotion as a father. How could goblins have any emotion of fatherhood when they make their children hunt as soon as they are born? Such a thing shouldn't be possible. For humans, they develop such emotions since they need to protect their own children after birth. But for goblins who need to hunt immediately even as a newborn, such emotions shouldn't exist. So why? It can't be helped. Someone needs to go," replied the old goblin. The old goblin did not falter from my displeased voice, instead it tenaciously faced me. Something tugged at me. Something that caused me to find displeasure in the old goblin's proposal. But what that something was, I didn't know. So I only stared at it coldly as I gave my approval. "Fine," I said. I watched the old goblin's lonely back as I saw him off into the large tree by himself. Wrong. What is it that's troubling me? It was as if there was a black mist within my head, suppressing my thoughts. Is it you? Altesia. Skill, activated. You don't think the goblin will betray you? How cute, said a voice inside my head. Shaking my head, I shrugged that voice off, and looked towards the departing old goblin. Follow your heart's lead. I yelled, sweeping away Altesia's interference. Then the old goblin bowed toward me, and it entered the giant tree alone. After a while, the old goblin came out with another goblin beside him. "Oh. There's quite a bit, aren't there?" said the enemy goblin as it smiled defiantly. But I know very well that contrary to that smiling fa.ade of his, the goblin carries with him great confidence. With a robe wrapped around him, and a staff in one hand, he exuded great pressure. And this goblin, rather than a goblin, his appearance is much closer to that of a human's. With his red skin, he's most likely a goblin rare. But this atmosphere that I can feel on my skin. This goblin is strong, my body is telling me that. Are you the chief? I asked. The goblin that stood before me, his bold appearance made it clear that he would not bow his head. L.rg but that's that. I'll still advise him all the same. That's right. I am the chief of the druids, replied the goblin. There's a distance of 20 steps between us. It's too bad, but that's not a distance I can close in an instant. Surrender, and offer yourself to me, I declared. Coo 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 coo. You know it to be meaningless, and yet you bother anyway. replied the druid's chief as he laughed. But fine. If you can defeat me, I'll give you everything. A duel between two beings that call themselves king. Just like the history books. But with this the casualties will be few, and the gains will be great. If I win, you shall give me everything. But then if you win. When I said that, it was only for a moment, but the druid's chief stared at me blankly. Then quickly, he broke out into laughter, and then said, "What a funny guy. You plan to die." A smile like that of a beast appeared on my face. It was as if a delicious prey had just been thrust before me. Then with that vicious smile, I answered the druid's chief, "We can gamble precisely because there are two equal things sought." Even I didn't know I would feel like this. Perhaps it's because this goblin's visage is so close to that of a human's. I see. Then in that case, as the druid chief was thinking, Reshia suddenly came out. "Hello. Do you mind? I can't see a thing." Without a care in the world, Reshia's voice resounded throughout that tense atmosphere. And the goblin in front of me froze. "Oi, Gramps, what is that thing?" asked the druid chief to the old goblin who was behind him. "The king's treasure, a human female," replied the old goblin. "A toy, in other words." "No, the king doesn't engage in such activities. Rather he seems to be quite fond of talking with her." "Oh." A sharp light shot from the druid chief's eyes. "I've decided. I want that girl." Reshia froze. I gave her a sidelong glance, and clicked my tongue at the back of my head. Then I looked at her and sarcastically said, "Congratulations, you've been personally requested. You must be jumping for joy." What are you talking about?" asked Reshia, not following what's going on as she compared me and the druid chief. "The reward for our duel. If I win, I'll have his hoard. If I lose, I'll hand you over." What are you deciding by yourself? This girl has absolutely zero awareness of being my prisoner. Well, I'm not treating her like one after all, so it's only expected, I suppose. Don't worry, I'm not planning on losing. I have no intentions of handing you to anyone either, I said, trying to comfort her. "TCH, replied Reshia, clearly still panicked. Gripping iron second, great steel sword, I stared at the foe before me, and calmed my burning heart. He probably didn't hear Reshia's mumbling, I thought to myself. Then steeling myself, I focused all of my strength to face the fitting opponent before me. "Come." At the resound of my voice, the battle beneath that tense atmosphere began. Author's note. It's a druid fight. Who would have thought that the old goblin would have a family? The old goblin's ability to talk so well right from the start is because of its high intelligence. But it is after all only a normal goblin, so it can't match up to the druids. Volume 1, Chapter 25. Duel 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 22, Class, Duke, Horde Chiefs, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. Kicking myself off the ground, I filled my body with power, and accelerated. The ground broke, and I turned into a blur. At the same time, I raised iron second, great steel sword, and with a growl, I swung it down, seeking to cut the goblin rare into two. Surprised, the goblin rare quickly retreated. But he was 2NA.VE. Does he think I can't chase such a slow retreat? Iron second crashed into the ground. And using the force of its recoil, I swung the great sword and slashed at the goblin rare. The skill guided my sword, leading it towards my foe. And with the mere legs of a goblin rare that's inferior to mine, he couldn't possibly dodge. But just as my blade was about to hit him, the goblin rare chanted a spell. "My vessel is clad in the wind, excel," he chanted. And suddenly, the goblin before me vanished. And the blade I had swung, hit nothing but thin air. "What splendid swordsmanship," remarked a voice from behind. A vicious smile appeared on my face. Then remarking, "I see you're quick on your feet," I turned towards the goblin. But at that same moment a blade of wind flashed towards me. Quickly, I swung my sword to repel it. Then I gripped my sword with both of my hands, and I looked on at my foe. As I thought, this one can't be dealt with by ordinary means. Skill, activated. When the numbers favor me, this skill can show me the weaknesses of my enemy. His weaknesses. The head, the heart, the staff. So his staff is his weakness even though we're both goblins. As I was thinking quietly to myself, analyzing the goblin, he yelled, "Nothing will happen if you just stand there." As he yelled, the goblin thrust his staff into the ground, and chanted another spell. "My heart rides on the wind, Windia." As soon as he chanted those words, the atmosphere shook, and 4 small tornadoes appeared around the goblin rare. "Are you planning to suffocate me?" I thought to myself. "Turn me into a blade, enchant." I chanted. Seeing the goblin rare conjure those gusts of wind, I cast my own spell, and clad my sword with the flames of darkness. Gurua! I howled. With the flash of my spirit, I crushed those tiny tornadoes with the great sword. But one of the tornadoes managed to cut through, and like a blade it struck me a wound. "It's hot," I thought, as I felt the warm sensation of an open wound upon my feet. But contrary to those feelings, the goblin rare before me was quite happy. "So you can also use magic," he happily exclaimed. Then the goblin rare began to chant a more powerful attack. "Oh wind, let the wings," but I wasn't having any of that, and I immediately charged towards him with my sword wrapped in black flame, leaving the goblin rare no other option but to run away. "Tch, my vessel is clad in the wind, Excel." I wielded my great sword at my side. And I thrust it at the goblin rare as fast as I could, trying to catch him as I thrusted a thrust that could pierce even the wind. Yet the enemy was still faster. The goblin rare channeled the power of Excel, and moved at a speed that made him seem as if he had vanished. But as soon as I lost sight of him, I quickly reacted by swinging my sword as I turned back. Yet I felt no resistance as my blade swung through the air. Did I miss? I asked myself. The resounding chant answered that question. "Like a strong wind. Like a whirlwind, wind cutter," chanted the goblin rare. And immediately, 2 blades shot at a speed undiscernible even by the eye, stirring up clouds of dust in its path. Behind those 2 blades, the goblin rare began to chant again. I yelled at the back of my mind, "Dodge." Then as I took a step with enough power to bore a hole in the land, I howled, "Gurua!" I swung my great sword at the nearing blade, crushing it. Then as the wind blade vanished, I rushed to the enemy with my sword still raised. And just when I thought the goblin rare would take a step back, he took a step towards me. "Fuck, that was a good call," I thought to myself. But it's still too slow. It takes great courage and insight to make the decision to take a step forward and aim for your enemy's defenseless bosom instead of running away. But even so, my sword is still faster than he gave me credit for. And I swung my sword down with a force that could crush even boulders, but then the goblin rare chanted another spell, "By the authority of the wind god, boost," he chanted. And suddenly a film of wind appeared around him, causing my attack to slip, while his own attack continued to make its way for my chest. "No!" screamed my instincts as the swinging staff continued to move, and immediately I chanted, overlapping with the goblin rares. "Let my body be inviolable, shield," I chanted. "The wind bird scythe sings, slash," he chanted. Our chants overlapped, and as my body was wrapped in black flames, the surging wind of scythe my foe had conjured crashed into me. The force of that power was such that it sent me flying. But somehow someway, I managed to stand up. I had braced myself for an attack as soon as I got up on my feet, but what came instead was the goblin rare's voice. Not bad, he said. The goblin rare looked to be enjoying himself from the bottom of his heart. Is that because of his unwavering confidence? I wondered. But not forgetting my manners, I replied, you too. After taking a short rest, I sprinted to close the distance between us again. I won't let myself get caught up in his pace. Or more specifically, I can't afford such luxuries. Being a goblin rare, he might not know this, but the heightened vision of a goblin duke is nothing to scoff at. I didn't miss the slight weakness he showed when he was bluffing a while ago, his shaking leg. The proof of his fatigue. Now, I'm going to have you let me take advantage of that, goblin. Why the rush? Asked the goblin rare. But without stopping, I swung my sword again. And with it I chanted, turn me into a blade, enchant. Black flames clad itself around my blade as I swung it. My physical abilities are far beyond the goblin rares, so I'm going to make full use of that and vanquish your magic. The goblin grew more exhausted with each slash, brimming with the power to finish him in one hit. My vessel is clad in the wind, excel, chanted the goblin rare. A war of attrition will only lead to my victory. The goblin rare knows this, so he will definitely take a gamble sometime during this fight. A gamble that will lead to my instant defeat. So I kept my eyes open, paying careful attention for any signs of such a plan. But at the same time, I'm not so nice as to let this goblin take that gamble. If you're not planning on anything, I thought, I'm going to cut you down right here. And I chased after the goblin who had just vanished again. I slashed and slashed, never letting him rest, a ceaseless flurry of attacks. What's wrong? Your movements have gotten slower. I taunted, trying to provoke the goblin in the midst of the onslaught. But he only replied with a sarcastic smile that I guess I still can't let my guard down then. Like a strong wind. Like a whirlwind, wind cutter, he chanted. The goblin rare casted another wind blade, and I dodged it by moving only half of my body. At the same time, the enemy accelerated. My vessel is clad in the wind, excel, he chanted. And in the next instant, he vanished from my vision. Immediately, I swung my great sword behind me as I turned, but the goblin managed to dodge my attack. The goblin rare turned around, heaving, breathless. He was clearly exhausted. Surrendering? I asked him, as I gripped the great steel sword tightly. But the goblin rare only laughed as he raised his staff towards me. If you're not surrendering, then I'm going to see this through till the end. I should get rid of his staff, I thought. So I mustered my strength, and directed it to the soles of my feet. Then with a step, the ground cracked, and in the next instant, I rocketed towards the goblin rare. But then at that moment, I saw the goblin rare stick his hand inside his robe. Not good. I thought, my instincts screaming for my life. What the goblin rare took out was a glittering, silver jewel. Then he began to chant, exalted name of God, hear my call, KRYZ. Immediately, I used all of my strength to break my charge, and then I rolled off to the side. But the goblin rare still thrusted his staff into the ground as he continued to chant, thy name. Wind god, Castor. Immediately, a tornado with a radius of 4 meters appeared with the goblin rare at its center. The tornado stood tall, towering over everything in the shape of a dragon. It groaned there high up above the sky as it looked down on me. I couldn't help but gulp at its dignified appearance. When I saw it come down to attack me, I felt cold sweat permeate my back. My mouth alone smiled. Magical energies flowed from the red snake on my arm, filling me with energy. It was as if it was urging me to howl at the monstrosity before me. Right, let's tear it apart, I said to myself. It's only a wind, right? Then let's go crush it. I took a step with my left foot forward, and held the sword upright. Then I mustered up all of the magic within me, and transferred it to my sword. As the dragon of wind descended, it opened its mouth, aiming for my head. Turn me into a blade, enchant. I chanted this as the third time I've used this chant, but this time, I used a great power incomparable to anything so far. Oh! I howled then with all of my strength, I met with the dragon of wind, and I cut it. With all of my strength, I cut it. Just one slash. The raging storm covered my vision. It lifted up the fallen rocks in its rampage. And at the great loss of magic power, I fell to my knees, the angry cries of the billowing wind, echoing in the background. Until the wind ceased, clouds of dust enveloped the area. Then when the wind ceased, I stood up, and swung my sword, sweeping the dust away. And then I wielded my sword in front of my chest once more, and I waited. The wind bird scythe sings, slash, chanted the rare goblin. Believing this to be the end, the goblin rare used the rest of his remaining strength to finish me off. That attack of his was like a great sword. I calmly parried his attack with my own sword, and the goblin's eyes opened wide. Then I pulled back my sword, and I swung it. The goblin rare no longer had any strength to dodge, and he flew into the air, drawing an arc. A foe I could not let my guard down even for a moment. The goblin rare gazed at the sky as he fell down to the ground. Then I touched his neck with my sword. To think I would misread at the last moment, he said. I just got lucky, I said. Heh, luck, replied the goblin, seemingly dissatisfied. If you can't accept that, then it's simply the difference in the object we seek, I said. The object we seek, he asked. Ambition, in other words. Ambition, you say. The goblin rare looked up despite his anguish. And knowing that the goblins in the village were also listening, I said out loud, I am going to build a country. I will gather all the goblins and create a mighty country. So follow me. I need your strength. The goblin rare had a hard time just breathing, but as if there was nothing funnier than what I had just said, he laughed. A goblin's kingdom, you say? Ha ha ha. I see, no wonder I lost. The goblin rare closed his eyes quietly, and then he took a deep breath. All right, go. Go and take everything that I have. I carried the bloodied, weakened goblin rare, and I carried him to where Reshia was. Reshia puffed her cheeks, but ignoring her I said, heal this one. As the goblin rare opened his eyes, he asked, why did you save me? And I answered, you're so called everything. That includes you yourself, right? The goblin rare stared at me blankly, then he broke out into laughter. Magic manipulation has advanced. The third impact, the third chant, acquired. Your level has risen. 22 equals 26. Author's note. I'm going to leave the relationship between the old goblin and his child for later. My apologies to those who were expecting it. The next opponent is finally the awaited rematch with the Grey Wolves. Volume 1, Chapter 26. Legend. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 26, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. Amongst the newly added horde of druids, 30 could be counted as warriors. Within that 30, 25 are able to actually use magic in combat. I gave a name to the goblin rare leading that horde. I name you Giza, I said. The goblin rare thanked me, but at the same time, he made a difficult face. This is the first time I've gotten this sort of response. What? Unsatisfied? I asked. No. I just realized that there really is no such thing as a perfect man, shrugged Giza. Well, I'm sorry, I have no taste. The non-combatants from the new horde along with the combatants totaled to 50. We took all those goblins along with us, and we returned back to the settlement. With the druids added, we now number 142 goblins in total. 92 combatants, and 50 non-combatants that include the female, the elderly, and the larvae. We've become quite the big family now. Gi Gu also fulfilled his task of protecting the village with no problem, and our hunting right now is proceeding favorably as well. I reformed the 3-man cells with the druids, then I showed them how we hunted, and the day ended. The next day, I used the skill to evaluate the goblins, picked out the promising goblins, and then had them form 3-man cells under Gi Ga. When the sun began to set, I led Giga and his group to hunt the south. And when the sky began to turn dark, we took our spoils and went back to the village. When I got back, I followed my usual schedule, and went over to Reshia's jail. But then I noticed that someone had gone ahead of me. Za, what are you doing here? I asked. Nothing in particular, he replied. Za seems to hunger for knowledge quite a bit. Even in our previous duel, it was for that reason that he had asked for Reshia to be his reward. But because of that, it seems Reshia's come to hate him, and has been refusing to talk to him. Unfortunately for him, Reshia is the king's treasure, leaving him at a standstill, unable to do anything. It's quite rare actually, seeing this goblin make such a bitter smile. It must be because his features resemble humans that his expression now strangely reeks of humanity. You got here at just the right time. I was just about to visit Reshia. Come, I said, to which Za replied with a bow, saying, thanks. A rather rare sight seeing this goblin bow. But then again, I wonder just how exactly you rejected this goblin, Reshia. For this overconfident goblin to be troubled so. I'm actually more concerned about that than my discussion with Reshia. As I entered the jail, Reshia saw me. Then quickly after, she saw Za follow from right behind. Immediately, a deep valley bore through her forehead. Why is that goblin here? She asked, visibly irritated. He wants to talk too, apparently, I replied. I'm talking because it's you. I don't want to talk with that goblin, bluntly replied Reshia. Oh, come on, don't say that. Consider it as a request from me, I said, trying to coax her to agree. Reshia mumbled to herself, then replying in a faint voice, almost whispering, she said, fine. But only when you're around. Looks like I'm hated, shrugged Za, bitterly smiling. What a persistent man, I thought. Then continuing, I said, today I want to talk about the gods. You mean, their legend? Asked Reshia, curious. Yes, especially the story of the god who birthed the earth and his daughters. What's the matter? For some reason, Reshia was frozen still, shocked, with a strange expression on her face. Ah, no. I was just a bit surprised. I didn't expect that you'd actually be interested in the pedigree of the gods, she replied. I looked back towards Za, and asked, is it that strange? Well, you'd normally ask for something more normal. Like the practical uses of magic for example, replied Za. Hearing that, I thought, oh, so that's what he's after. Then I asked Reshia, Reshia, do you also find the stories of the gods to be meaningless? Ah, no. I don't think so at all. After all, to gain knowledge from the study of the history of the gods is the raison d'etre of us, apostles, replied Reshia. The raison d'etre of apostles. That apostle of God of yours, is there some special meaning to it? I asked. Yes. In our world, that is to say in the human world, there is something which we call, religion. Do you have something like that as well? Replied Reshia. Do we? I asked, throwing the question to Za. Nope, curtly replied Za. Our way of living is simple. Those with no power, die. Those with power, we obey. But of course, we do also have some hint of love for the gods that grant us their divine protection. There are also cases like me though, where we don't find ourselves having any sort of attachment or gratefulness even after receiving divine protection like the one I got from Altisia. But then again, I'm probably in the extreme minority. As I thought that to myself, Reshia said, I see. Then it might be difficult for you to understand, but amongst humans there are those that receive, and those that don't receive the favor of God. Well, this discussion has turned rather troublesome. Reshia doesn't look like she's planning on stopping any time soon either. I feel like I've pressed a dangerous switch. Not good, I'm starting to regret bringing this topic up. At that, I decided to interrupt Reshia. Hesitating, I said, wait Reshia. In other words. Yes. What is it, said Reshia as she shot me a gaze that looked like it said, even though we were at such a good part. I know I don't understand religion well, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the gods, I said. Sigh. All right. Let's talk about religion some other time then, she replied, a little downhearted. The ancestor god, Kutyarga. It was he who created the world. He created the land within the Great Sea in 7 nights and 8 days. Then he cut off a part of his body to create a new god that would watch over his creation. The mother goddess, Dietna. Kutyarga worked together with the mother goddess that was born of a part of his own flesh, Dietna, to create new life one after another. The god of water, the god of forest, the god of wind, the god of land, the god of illusions, the god of dreams, the god of starfaring, many, many gods. For where there is life, there is a god ruling over it. The world became filled with gods, and Kutyarga and Dietna were satisfied. But when the mother goddess gave birth to the god of fire, she was burned. That wound became the reason for her death, and her trip to the world of the dead. Kutyarga was saddened. After all, he had just lost the person he had created life with, his literal other half. In his grieving, he sank his body into this world, leaving only behind the order to create more life to his children. And his wish for him and Dietna to become a part of the world they had created together, came true. Following his wishes, the remaining gods worked together to create new life. The gods of forest and water created the elves after the mother goddess they had looked up to. The gods of land and wind shaved oars to create the demi-humans. The gods of illusion and dreams weaved together the dreams and illusions, creating the dragons. The gods of starfaring passed through the different stars, gathering resources. And with those, they created the giants. All that remained was the god of fire. It was because of him that the mother goddess who had given birth to him, died. All alone and the youngest, he was the only god who could not create new life. For the other gods knew that it was because of him that the father and mother gods had died. And his brothers and sisters refused to work with him. The oldest amongst the gods, the god of water, felt pity for the god of fire. He called the other gods, and everyone gave what they had left over to the god of fire. The god of forest gave a long vine. The god of water brought cold water. The god of land brought a lump of land, and so on. Each of the gods brought to the god of fire the parts that they could not use. But the god of fire persevered. With his clumsy hands, he mixed water with the lump of earth, and kneaded it. He wished with all of his heart to mix that with all of the excess things he had received. He recalled the figure of his father that he had once seen in his younger days. Please, he wished. Let me give birth to life just as my father had. And so, the humans were born. And the gods scattered the lifeforms that they had created all over the land that their father had created. The elves were sent to the deep secrets of the forest. The demi-humans to the windy meadows. The dragons to the colossal mountains whose heights were almost dreamlike. The giants to the ground beneath. And the humans to the small beach. As the different lifeforms worked together, they prospered, and grew in number. Satisfied, the gods gradually made more life. Beasts, magical beasts, and even those that the gods thought to be a failure did the gods bring forth into the world. But the god of fire was sad. For the humans he had created were far too weak compared to the other races. So the god of fire consulted the god of water. What should I do? He asked. And the god of water spoke of the time their father created their mother. The god of fire cried and complained to the god of water, saying, "But no one wants to work with me." And the god of water suggested, "Why don't you take half of your body and distribute it?" The god of fire was overjoyed. "Ah, I see," he said. "If I do that I won't be alone anymore." And so the god of fire used his own legs, and created the 2 moons. He used his right arm, and he gave man the god of knowledge. He used his left arm, and he created the spirits. Then he used his own head, and gave birth to the god who birthed the earth. And lastly, he used his body and created the sun. The spirits broke contact with the humans as soon as they were born. They were saddened by the death of the fire god, so they changed their form, and melded into the earth to save their creator, giving birth to the volcanoes that would birth new land. Then the gods born of the fire god's right arm and head came to be called the new gods. The god who birthed nations came to be known as Ativ. The goddess of wisdom, Hera. The 2 gods wedded each other, and gave birth to the gods and goddesses that would guide humanity. The eldest daughter, Altesia, took charge of valor. The eldest god, Gerdica, took charge of weapon and magic. The next daughter, Hekaterina, took charge of victory and glory. The third daughter, Luriuna, ruled over destiny. And the fourth daughter was the goddess of healing, Zenobia. They guided humanity. And Ativ and Hera worked together to create the concept of kingdoms. But as the humans were developing, the gods' world were on the verge of destruction. The gods who had birthed life thoughtlessly began to argue amongst themselves whose creation was the greatest. Eventually the argument grew, and though the god of water, the eldest amongst them, tried to quell the fighting. Gradually, even the older amongst them were dragged into the fight. Until eventually, the gods came up with an answer. They told amongst themselves, "Let us find out whose creation is the strongest." And so began a gruesome exchange of life and death. The elves and the demi-humans, the giants and the dragons, without mercy did the races kill each other. Yet within that chaos, that war of races, it was the humans protected by their gods that triumphed. Clad within the valor of Altesia. The weapons and magic of Gerdica in their hands. The promise of victory and glory from Hekaterina. And through the guidance of the goddess of destiny, Luriuna, humans known as heroes appeared to sacrifice themselves, saving humanity as Zenobia's love saved the wounded. And before anyone knew it, the humans held the biggest land and influence. They burned the forest, they shaved the mountains, they dug the earth and gathered precious ores, expanding their dominion. The other races hated each other just as their gods had willed, but they possessed no power to fight the humans. The power of the new gods led by Ativ was simply that powerful. One of the gods looked on at that in annoyance, and eventually, that god proposed to the gods an idea. "Let's have our mother, Dietna, return and bring peace to our world." "Fighting is stupid after all," said the god. The other gods agreed as even their power had fallen after all the killing. And so the door to the world of the dead opened. The gods prayed. "Mother goddess, Dietna," they prayed. "Please guide us this one time." But what greeted them from the other side was a den of snakes. The snakes feasted upon the gods, and the world descended into darkness. But the snakes were not the only ones to pass through the door. Magical beasts, monsters, and even the dead, all passed through. The filthy and the corrupted beasts were released into the world. The god of water who had somehow managed to survive along with the elder gods all felt fear at this crisis. "At this rate the world our father had created will be filled with death," they cried. But the elves, demi-humans, and giants that they had given birth to were powerless against the ceaseless forces of death. It was then that a ray of light shot before them. The humans that Ativ led, although only a little, were able to fight against the forces of death. So the gods focused their powers towards the gods of the humans and the demi-humans, the dragons, the giants, the elves, and the humans were all unified under Ativ. Ativ and Hera placed Altesia as the vanguard, allowing her to lead the coalition. Show your courage. Draw your weapon. Believe in your destiny. To victory and glory. Altesia led the coalition, and with Gertica, Luriuna, and Hekaterina, they desperately fought the endless army of death. Altesia was the vanguard, leading from the front with her sword brandished. Gertica was at the center, creating weapon and magic one after another. Luriuna would save those who would die from their destiny, and Hekaterina would sing praises of victory and glory, lifting everyone's spirits. After 100 years of fighting, they were finally able to drive back the army of death through the door they had come from. As Altesia's sword pierced into the remains of Dietna's corpse on the other side, the battle ended. The old gods thanked the new gods, and they all returned to their respected regions without arguing. And they decided to live onwards without choosing a path of conflict. It was the same for the lives they had created as well. The elves went to the deep secrets of the forest. The demi-humans to the meadows and forests. The dragons to the high mountains. The giants went beneath the ground. It was the age of the new gods. When distressed, Altesia would come. And Gertica would solve problems with his magic and weapons. While Luriuna would lead the destiny of the people, and Hekaterina would promise glory and victory. But their age of prosperity would not last long. For the god who birthed the earth, Ativ, was charmed by the beauty of Zenobia. The goddess of wisdom, Hera, changed her appearance at Ativ's change of heart, while Altesia burned in jealousy. The weapons and magic Gertica created eventually brought chaos to the world, and he stopped. Luriuna, who should be saving humans from death, found herself intoxicated with the death of humans. Hekaterina found herself in a dilemma in who to provide victory and glory to, that she eventually forgot to bless anyone at all. With the gods in that state, humanity gradually fell. Depravity, putrefaction, and jealousy spread like the plague, and the humans grew to forget the pride they once carried with them as they grew fearful of sickness and death. And Altesia continued to burn even more in jealousy. The one who led the army, and drove away the army of death, was her. Not anyone else, but her. And yet, why is it only Zenobia? Why is it only her that is loved by Ativ? The flames of jealousy burned within Altesia, and Ativ grew to become sick of her. So he handed to her the country of the dead for her to rule. The country of the dead was left alone since the passing of Dietna, and was currently on the way to destruction. At this rate, the country of the dead will be completely destroyed. When their country is destroyed, they will leave theirs, and find themselves into the country of the humans again. Altesia went to the country of the dead by herself, pulled Gertica's blade from the corpse of Dietna, and slayed the snakes. Her wrath was terrifying, and eventually she came to rule the country of the dead. And this time, the one to attack the country of the humans was her. In the blink of an eye, she conquered the human world. Ativ, who had forgotten everything because of his love for Zenobia. The goddess, Hera, who had changed her form. Gertica, who had already decided not to create any more magic or weapons. Luriuna, who found herself amused toying with destiny. Hekaterina, who had forgotten to bless victory and glory to anyone. It was only when they were pierced by Altesia's sword did they understand the depths of Altesia's anger and despair. The gods awoke when half the world had been taken by Altesia, and they put their powers together, and fought Altesia. Ativ remembered to work with the people. Hera shone the light of knowledge upon man again. Gertica began to create weapons and magic once more. Luriuna began to weave the threads of destiny, guiding the heroes. Zenobia healed the wounded. With the gods working together, they were able to fight against Altesia. But there was no one who could fight against Altesia in the front lines. The giant snake that would break the earth as it crawled. The black dragon that ruled the sky as it flew. The twin-dot-headed snake that would rot the waters, and the snake that burned everything with its black flames. With them, no one could stop Altesia. Ativ was greatly perplexed. It was, after all, a disaster he had caused. So he asked the old gods for help. Many of them hesitated, but it was a fact that they owed him from the previous war. So they joined the fight as Ativ's allies. And together, they were able to push Altesia back to the country of the dead. Ativ and the other gods then swore an oath not to interfere with the humans too much. And then in order to weaken Altesia's power, the gods went to sleep. Here ends the age of the gods. And the curtain on history is drawn. It was bright already by the time the story ended. The only ones awake were me and Reshia. Even Giza and Lily, who should have already been used to this, were asleep. Do you understand? Asked Reshia. Yeah, I replied. There's just one thing that I absolutely have to confirm. Have you ever met Zenobia? I asked. No. I've said it just now, but the gods hate to interfere with us, she replied. Is that the same with Altesia? Of course. That's the very reason why the gods went into slumber. I see. So for the humans, this is nothing but a legend. Or is Altesia just generally uninhibited? In any case, she's not as distant as the humans say the gods are. Which also goes to say that those heroes that I must kill might appear, show your courage, huh? Why is it when I hear those words, I can't help but see Altesia's dazzling, gallant figure clad in armor at the back of my head? Asterisk thump. As I thought that, I felt an itch rise up from the coiled red snake on my right arm. It was a good lesson, I said, thanking Reshia. Right, replied Reshia with a smile as she went to sleep. I need to remember to exercise enough caution when talking to Reshia. Anyway, I better sleep. Author's note. Reshia. Senses lesson on the story of the gods. The entire lecture lasted a total of 8 hours. As for breaks, they took 10-minute breaks every 3 hours. Volume 1, Chapter 27. Grey Wolf 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 26, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. I had the druids get used to fighting as 3-man cells, and at the same time, I had Giza teach me the basics of magic in order to defeat the Grey Wolves. As for Reshia, I've sort of learned my lesson. And while I thought to keep my distance from her for a while, I happened to see a tottering kobold pass by me. So I took a slab of dried meat, and waved it in front of it. It vigorously wagged its tail. So knowing full well that it was interested, I threw the meat into Reshia's jail. The kobold followed the slab of meat, jumping into Reshia's room. Heh! This is for keeping me awake all night. I think I heard Lily scream just now, but let's ignore that. Ignore. How adult of you, remarked Giza as he shot a cold glance at me. Considering last night, something on this level is just fine. That aside, teach me your magic, I said, brushing away what just happened. MN, replied Giga as he nodded, then he began his lecture on magic. I think you know this already, but, yeah, just keep it short and simple. With another nod, the lecture on magic began. To put it simply, magic is God's grace, while magic power is something exhibited through the consumption of something within living beings that is known as ether. For humans, they call it mana, for everyone else, they call it ether. And it is by consuming this ether that Giza is able to summon blades of wind and tornadoes. Ether is something that belongs within the body of living things. As soon as it touches the air or the water, it will immediately disperse, and return to the body. Magic can be demonstrated as long as the ether hasn't dispersed yet. Because ether disperses upon contact with foreign body, gathering power and casting powerful magic is not something common. So what you're saying is that ether is something that is normally used within the body. I said. No, that's not it either, replied Giza as he shook his head. Ether is difficult to use inside the body. For example, if one wishes to strengthen his muscles with ether, he would have to fill his body with ether, set a course for it, and manipulate it until one achieves his desired effect. The fireball casted by the friar that I fought before wasn't just throwing a ball of flame. If he had made a mistake in his control, that fireball would have simply dispersed. But if he had tried to pour the ether into his body to strengthen himself, in the worst-case scenario, his body could have been torn apart, while consuming the ether within. But there's no way to know other than trying it out, right? I said, arguing to use said ability. To which Ji-za sarcastically asked, in the middle of a fight. That question left me at a loss. Is it impossible after all for someone with an unstable mind like me? After thinking for a while, I asked for something else. Then would you happen to have any techniques for increasing speed? Like that Excel you used, I said. What I need to watch out for the most in the coming fight with the Grey Wolves is that speed of theirs. If I could just put a stop to that speed, then in the worst case, I could at least exchange blows. That spell only requires ether to be released around the body with a direction set. However, getting used to the force is quite difficult, said Ji-za. A one-way jet pack in other words. But then again, it seems like Ji-za was casting it quite a lot. But of course, after all, I have the divine protection of the god of wind. I can create a boundary in front of me as long as I have magic power. Divine protections have that sort of effect. Unfortunately, mine isn't that reliable. In any case, I should go and practice this. Alright, come with me for a bit. I'll give it a shot. Now, asked Ji-za, a little surprised. Of course. Whether I can use it or not in battle depends on your guidance after all, right? So please help me out, teacher. Teacher. That doesn't sound bad at all, replied Ji-za, pleased. Taking that goblin rare who was quite pleased with himself, we left the village, and I practiced magic. 9 days has passed since I began my special training in magic. Somehow someway I managed to get my control over Excel good enough for me to be able to use it in battle. It took a long time, but finally, we're ready. Ji-za, do you know of the Grey Wolves? I asked. Yes, a rather powerful enemy, he replied. I'm going to hunt that pair. If it was up to you, which goblins would you bring? Ji-za folded his hands and pondered. Then after a while, he said, the goblins under me alone will be enough. In other words, normal goblins can't do anything. I'll have you change that way of thinking, I said back. Then wielding my steel great sword on my back, we ended the training. When I got back to the village, I called the goblins above the rare class, and ordered them to gather. Gi-ga, Gi-go, Gi-za, Gi-gi, take 10 goblins with you each, and prepare for a hunt. Our target, the Grey Wolves. It shall be done even at the cost of my life, replied Gi-go. For him, this battle is also a funeral for the goblins he couldn't protect. As you will, replied Gi-ga as he kneeled. The goblins each nodded to me. Then after they finished picking their 10 goblins, we prepared the necessary rations, and then left the village, heading northwest. Leading from the front were Gi-ga's beasts. What he brought with him this time was a double-headed ostrich. Its body was big enough to easily carry a goblin, and with enough strength to do so without even losing speed. Gi-ga rode on a double head, while giving his subordinate beasts orders. Gi-ga guarded our rear while following the main unit from behind. And Gi-go and Gi-za protected our flanks, while keeping vigilant that it's too quiet. When these many goblins are moving, there would at least normally be some birds or rabbits who would be startled. But right now, not even a single cry could be heard. No way, could it be? Could it be that the Grey Wolves have already eaten everything in this area? If so, then the Grey Wolves should appear by themselves without us having to look for them, such delicious preys are throwing themselves before it after all. There's no way it wouldn't come. And as if my mind was read, the vanguard unit led by GI stopped. Are they here? They're coming. I yelled. Immediately, GIGA went in front just as I've ordered him to ahead of time. And GI Go and GI ZA merged with the main unit to protect the flanks. And just as much as I could wish for, the land before us was a land with few trees, almost like a meadow. The grey wolf led over 20 wolves behind it, gazing at me with the gaze of a predator looking at its prey. That dignity, that majesty, the aura of that grey wolf shook my soul. And my face twisted into a smile. The arm wielding iron second. The tips of my feet that bore into the ground. From the red snake coiled on my arm all the way to the entrails beneath my skin and the blood flowing through my veins. Everything was screaming to me, burning into me the sensation of my brimming power. G-yo-yo-yo-yo. My soul maddened, I bellowed out a howl. Skill, activated. The subordinate wolves have been stunned. Yo-yo-yo-yo-yo-yo. At the same time, the grey wolf howled an indomitable howl, and many of my subordinates fell to their knees. Gi Ga. By your will. I left the command of the forces to Giga, who was at the rear. Gi Za, cover me. Diovi Ko, leave it to me. Gi Go, don't lose focus. I know, replied Gi Go as he drew his curved sword. Gi, this time, don't let your beasts die. Yes, Chief, could it be that the one who's having a hard time keeping himself together is me? Go. I yelled. At my lead, our force became one unit, and we charged into the pack of wolves. But the wolves were only a moment slower. Yo-yo-yo-yo. The howl of the grey wolf woke the subordinate wolves from their stupor. But this is exactly what I was aiming for. Wielding my sword on my side, I gripped it tight. We'll do this in one breath. My life is like a cloud of dust, excel. Ether gathered behind me, then like an explosion, I was sent flying forward. Then focusing the ether towards my blade, I chanted, turn me into a blade, enchant. Having been propelled at a speed that instantly shortened the distance of 30 steps to 0, it was as if a wall of air was pushing against me, keeping me from breathing. But even so, this is something worth doing. Yo-yo-yo. The howl of the grey wolf seemed to have echoed, but my ears failed to catch anything. Only that the grey wolf's giant frame suddenly appeared before me, tch. Grinding my teeth, I endured the force. My body grazed against the grey wolf, causing its power to weaken slightly. I tumbled on the ground, but immediately, I stopped the momentum, and stood up. Where is it? Joa. A groan from right beside me. With the power of the skill, I swung my sword according to instinct. The sword smashed into something that felt like a giant tree. Then immediately after, a great pressure came. It was the grey wolf. Using all of my strength, I forced back the grey wolf. The sight of its sharp fangs and its giant claws sent a chill running through my back. No, that's wrong. This is something that I've been yearning for. This is something that I myself should have been yearning for. A strong foe. A chance to wash away the shame of that day. Activating the skill, I scanned for my opponent's weakness. The eyes, the fang, the heart. It's close to its back. Skill, activate. For the first time, I released the rampaging soul on my own volition. G-O-R-U-O. While suppressing the urge, I released my power. I activated skill, and at the same time. And brimming with power, I stopped my great sword with my arm, and supported my body with my legs. Magical energies flowed through my body, and my blood boiled within me. Sparks appeared as my great sword clashed with the fangs of the grey wolf. Focusing more of my strength, my feet sank into the ground. And the grey wolf's pressure challenged me from in front. G-U-R-U-O-A. The frothing cells within me, the rushing blood within, and the magical energies within burned hot like scorching flame. Turn me into a blade, enchant. My blade ignited, and with its flames alit, I pushed the sword into the grey wolf's fang and nails. And then I swung the blade, arg. But at the last moment, I missed. Right before my great sword hit it, it jumped back. I suppose it's just what you'd expect from the reflexes of a wolf raised in the wild. But after taking a better look, blood was clearly flowing from its right leg, and from the left part of the scruff of its neck. It was wounded from excel and enchant. The distance between us is short. Yoo-oo-yoo-yoo. The grey wolf howled, and its subordinate wolves began to retreat. Looks like it told its pack to protect the rear. And then gradually, the grey wolf before me began to retreat. But I won't let you run. Silently, I sharpened my resolve, and I yelled, after them. With that order, my subordinates began to chase after the subordinate wolves. If the grey wolf tries to interfere with my subordinates' chase, I'm going to make use of that opening, and pierce it dead. Each time the grey wolf retreated, I would move forward to shorten the distance lengthened. That leg of it is most likely no longer capable of using the same speed as it did before. Then in that case. You. But then suddenly, the grey wolf's body became hazy, what? Goo, ha. Then without even having the time to cast shield, I was blown away. But the power of its attack has weakened. Victory is right before me. Tumbling on the ground, I stopped the momentum, and I picked myself up. TCH, but the grey wolf was already running by the time I managed to stand. I told you. I'm not going to let you run. Canceling enchant, I chased after the grey wolf with all my strength. As I ran after the grey wolf, I recalled something I had forgotten in my fervor, causing cold sweat to permeate my back. Why is that grey wolf fighting by itself? It was definitely a pair before, where did the other grey wolf disappear to? The worst scenario flashed through my mind. Could it be that the grey wolves purposely ordered its subordinates to withdraw in order to separate us? If so, then I've been made a fool out of by a beast twice, fuck. In any case, I need to beat the grey wolf as soon as possible, and gather my subordinates, otherwise. But, the more impatient I become, the worse I'll move. Even if the grey wolf is wounded, its legs are still better than mine. Following the trail of blood and stench, I left the meadows and entered into the dense forest. Fuck, now even if I gather the goblins, it's still going to be a tough fight. Even if I use skill and call the goblins, they'll have a hard time finding me. Then again, if this isn't a trap, then this might be the best opportunity I'll get to destroy the grey wolves. While gradually getting impatient, I reached the end of the forest. But just as I was about to go through, Gururu. One of the grey wolf's subordinates attacked me from above. Jayuyuyu. I quickly cut it, but then another three came, attacking me from below, and from both flanks at the same time. My body is inviolable, shield. Immediately, I casted shield, and swung my blade to get some distance. Then I kicked away the biting wolves, crushed them under my foot, and sheathed my sword. Are they buying time? For what? Could it be that they're missing a part of their group, and are waiting for the other group's return? If so, then the wolves can't win against me. Immediately, I activated the skill, weakening the wolves. And then I left the forest. What greeted me ahead was a cave where the grey wolf was lying in. It's not dead. Having lost too much blood, its legs shook as it stood. You. I can't let my guard down. Slowly, I shortened the distance between us. But then. Owen. I heard a voice from inside the cave. For just a moment, the grey wolf looked towards the dark cave. Those pupils of it seemed to be enduring something. Then as its gaze returned to stare at me, anger could be visibly seen in them. And then it howled a howl with ferocity unlike any of its previous howls, causing my hair to stand on end. Jiru AAA. Without any care for its defenses, it literally turned itself into a bullet as it rammed its body against me. TCH. A sudden change after hearing that voice from within the cave. Something's definitely up. Jaruyuyu. Its subordinate wolves attacked me from behind. I held back the urge to click my tongue, and swung my blade behind me. Jiyurusuee. Raging in anger, the grey wolf rammed itself into me, blowing me away along with its allies. Has it lost its sanity? The wounds on the grey wolf has been bleeding non-stop. But without even so much as looking at it, the grey wolf ran towards me to kill me. Have it your way then. Have it your way, you mutt. My body is inviolable, shield. Gruaa. Wielding my blade, I received the grey wolf's fangs that were aimed for my neck. And then. Turn me into a blade, enchant. I can't cast enchant and shield at the same time, so the shield was cancelled when I used enchant, and the grey wolf bore its fangs into me. Blood spurted into the air. But in exchange. Skill, activated, you think I'll lose. With a vigor that sought to exhaust my ether, the flames of darkness wrapped itself around my blade. This is the end. I thrusted Iron Second into the grey wolf, piercing through its hard fur, gouging out its entrails. Gro. But the grey wolf, renowned for its life force, refused to release its fangs from the scruff of my neck. And instead it bore its fangs even deeper into my body. At the same time, half of my strength left me, and the condition for a skill was met. Stage 1 activated, physical strength, agility 20% up. Are you? The thrusted blade sank even deeper into the grey wolf's body. The gushing blood from the wolf's mouth mixed with the spurting blood from my neck. Whose blood belonged to who could no longer be discerned. But even then, the grey wolf refused to let its fangs go. Our gazes locked, and we spat curses at each other. I'll do it as many times as you want. Skill, stage 2 activated, physical strength 30%, agility 30% up. Iron Second sank even deeper, and its tip could now be faintly seen through the back of the grey wolf. Guru AAA. Mustering the last of its strength, the grey wolf howled. And it bit into my shoulder as it continued to spit out more blood. Madness and killing intent mixed. And the fountain of blood dyed my vision in crimson, but, even then. NN. AAA. Victory will be mine. Mine. Skill, stage 3 activated, at the same time, a second activated, physical strength 40%, agility 40% up. Along with that rise in power, violent, burning emotions surged from the depths of my body. Fine. Since it's become like this, I'll accompany you until the bitter end. More blood spurted as the grey wolf tried to tear off the tip of my shoulder. It knows that its wounds will open if it tries to forcefully raise its head like that with its fangs stuck to me, yet it still refuses to let go. As that pain that felt like I was being torn to pieces, insanity took me. And I raised my sword while being skewered by the grey wolf. At the abnormal bulging of muscles, more blood spurted from the grey wolf, showering my whole body in blood. I am AAAA. I swung my great sword. OOAA. And I severed the grey wolf's body into two. The grey wolf died with its fangs firmly sunk into me. Then, as if I had entered silence itself, all the sound around me began to fade. Half alive, and half dead, a pool of blood spread around me. There was no one else here. No grey wolf, no subordinate wolves. Just me and a pool of blood. Chief. Then I heard Giga swallowing his breath. Ah, so they're safe. Thrusting my sword into the ground, I leaned on it like a cane, and I sank down to the ground. I don't want to show such an unsightly appearance to my subordinates. But I've lost too much blood. Giga, call Lady Reshia now. I can hear Giga's voice. Giga, I said. Chief, he asked, panicked. Make sure that the other goblins are safe. I'm going to sleep, for a bit. Like that I lost my consciousness while leaning onto my great sword. Your level has risen. 26 equals 60. After having gained proficiency with skill, you have unlocked a hidden power. Soul of a crazed warrior will now attack you mentally. Physical strength 30%, agility 30%, magical power 30% up. You will also not be affected by other mental attacks aside from the effect of Soul of a Crazed Warrior. Your fighting spirit will rise towards opponents you have defeated before. Damage reduction 20%. Volume 1, Chapter 28. That which should be protected. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 60, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes were Reshia and my subordinates. Reshia looked like she was about to cry at any moment, and my goblin subordinates looked deathly worried. Looking around me, I saw that we were still in front of the cave. The fangs that were sunk into me during the fight, however, were no longer there on my shoulder. The wound was also being closed at a frightening rate. What an absurd healing power, I thought. I waited for the wound to finish closing before standing up, but I still tottered. Anemia, I suppose. Wryly smiling, I shook my head, and confirmed my surroundings. Then I asked Giga, how much time has passed since then? To which he replied, I ordered Giga to run as soon as I could, so not much time has. At his reply, I looked up. The dazzling sun above us was yet to set. Then Reshia's complaining voice reached my ears, saying, Mr. Giga overworked his beasts just to carry me here, you know. So you should thank Mr. Giga. And you should thank Mr. Giga as well, because if it wasn't for his quick thinking, it might have been too late to save you. Oh, right. Sorry for worrying you, I curtly replied. Then I placed my hand over her head to stop her from giving a long-winded sermon. There's no way I'd be worried for you, she argued. Ignoring her, I went ahead and thanked Giga for a job well done. Giga, good job. Go ahead and spoil your beasts, I said. Then Giga bowed, and I thanked Giga next. You too, Giga. You saved my life. Don't mention it, he replied. Then after thanking him with a nod, I called out to Giga who was currently looking at the cave. Has anyone entered the cave? I asked. No one has entered, he replied, a hint of worry in his voice as if bracing himself for rebuke. Shaking my head to his misunderstanding, I said, that's not it. Rather you did a good job holding back. It's better to keep people from entering rashly so as to prevent unnecessary sacrifice after all. But although that decision might have been clear as day, for Giga who must have been feeling eager to go in because of his history with the wolves, it might not have been the easiest decision to make. Yet despite that, he actually managed to make the right call. That's something worthy of praise. Then reporting the damages incurred from the fight, Giga spoke. Few have died in this battle. That 3-man cell you taught us, it's pretty good. It's more or less thanks to luck though, I thought. Well then, compensating the blood I've lost comes first. After that come the cave. So grabbing the entrails of the severed grey wolf, I took a mouthful of it, grinded it under my fangs, and then swallowed it. Then I said, This much should be fine. As the surrounding people stared at me, I ordered them to enter the cave. Giga, pick 3 elites amongst the druids, I ordered. You mean 2 others aside from me, right? He replied, showing that ever so confident smile of his. Then continuing, I gave the rest of my orders. Giga, ready yourselves. We're entering the cave. Giga, you stay here to keep watch. If anything happens, let us know immediately. As the goblins bowed toward me simultaneously, I took another bite out of the wolf's entrails. I need to make up for the lost blood. Noldem unfortunately, I can't think of any other method aside from this. Well, it's still better than nothing. Then suddenly, Reshia objected, saying, "You're not thinking of going into battle again, are you?" I couldn't help but smile wryly at those objecting eyes of hers as I said back, "If I don't finish off the grey wolves here, more of my subordinates will die. Besides, I'm not one to let opportunities slip by. Destiny knows no mercy for those that fail to take the chances they are given. It's a divine tale of old, I'm surprised you know this." "I don't. I'm just using my head. You know, in order to survive, that is." "Did I just hear you call me stupid?" "Oh. You're aware. That's great. That means there's still hope for you." Heaving, and her eyes ablaze, Reshia stomped, and then she yelled, "I'm coming as well." "I can't guarantee your safety," I warned. "I'm fine by myself," stomped Reshia again. "Do as you wish," I replied, wryly smiling at her stubbornness. Sending off the enraged lady, I looked towards the cave. Now, I wonder just what it was that drove that grey wolf mad, I quietly asked. We entered the cave, and what greeted us was a dim environment with little light. Darkness of this level is no problem for us goblins, but for Reshia, it's hopeless. So to compensate for her eyes' inability, she's using light magic to light the path by her feet. The cave itself isn't that wide. And after a bit of walking, the reason why the grey wolf went mad finally showed itself. "So that's why," I muttered. The remains of a grey wolf within a sea of blood appeared before us. Its eyes were wide open, but empty. Nothing reflected on them. Maddened by the death of its partner, I thought to myself. As I neared the corpse, I wondered to myself what caused it to bleed to death. Then something caught my eye. The wound that continued to bleed was located right below its stomach. The moment I saw that, the grey wolf's somber eyes with resolve hidden within it flashed again at the back of my mind. I thought it was anger I felt then, but that's not it, is it? It was resolve, right? It couldn't retreat. Not with this. The madness I saw when our eyes met as it sunk its fangs into my shoulder. I've finally understood the reason behind those eyes. "Reshia, come," I said. "The reason why it couldn't let me go no matter what, is here before my very eyes." And I held that reason within my arms, lifting it up in an embrace. 2 grey wolf pups. I don't know if they're dead already, or if they're just sleeping. But I can still feel the warmth from them, so it shouldn't be too late yet. Embracing the 2 grey pups who were rolled into a ball with their eyes were closed, I ordered Reshia, "Heal them," I curtly said. "Why don't you just love saying whatever you want, don't you?" she complained. Reshia's voice was a bit stiff, but she still held her hands out immediately. In an instant, all signs of doubt and confusion left her face, and that inhuman expression of a saint appeared in its place. "That is the proof of her resolve. Let relief be given to all, heal," she chanted. A pale light shined within the cave, wrapping the newborn pups in its warmth. And in the next instant, Reshia declared, saying, "It's done." And lo and behold, the pups were there, sleeping peacefully. To which I muttered, hypocrisy. A sudden burst of self-derision. I killed its parents, and stole its children. And under the pretense of saving it, I lied to myself, saying I won't kill these pups. I'm not heartless, true. But at the same time, I'm a bit too bloody for something like gentleness. Then without any hesitation, Reshia said, "There is more than just one side to things, you know." And I couldn't help gaze at her with my eyes wide open. Both because she was able to hear me, and because I had no idea what she was talking about. "The fact that you are suffering means that you have a conscience, right? Then in that case, you should just follow that," she said. Those amethyst eyes that were looking at me were not stiff like those of the goddess. But those eyes still contained with them a piercing light that could pierce through any man. "Don't say stupid things," I retorted. "I am a monster. I only saved these to bolster my own war potential. Don't misunderstand." Embarrassed from having been seen through, I spat out a lie. But at the same time, it was a likely story. "We've seen all there is to see. We're going home," I said. Leading my goblin subordinates, I exited the cave. "A real monster wouldn't call itself a monster," muttered Retia. But I pretended not to hear her words as I continued to walk. Volume 1, Chapter 29. Swordsmanship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 60, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Abnormal Status. When we got back to the village, I immediately went back to my own room, and lied on my straw mattress. The battle this time was actually quite dangerous. I managed to somehow cover for the blood loss by eating the grey wolf's meat, but that's not something I can rely on all the time. As I laid down the pups beside me, I closed my eyes, and fell into slumber. Time passed, and then I felt something hairy touch my face, and I woke up. There, I saw the grey wolf pups sleeping before me. "Ah," I muttered to myself. "They're alive. I'm glad." As I heaved a sigh of relief, thinking something that was out of character for me, I closed my eyes again. And the breath of the goddess of sleep, Luna, immediately took me. When I woke up the next day, the first thing I did was to go interview the goblins that leveled up. As I sat cross-legged, the grey wolf pups frolicked about on top of my knees. And for whatever reason a sense of rivalry was ignited within the kobold as it kept trying to play with me. It's somehow irritating, I thought. In any case, having already reached level 60, the only goblins whose status I can't see with my skill are those that are above level 60. In other words, goblins that will soon promote up. And it is to those goblins that I need to present as much opportunities to fight in as possible. And since there are no more major opponents, I should be able to send them to observe the west and hunt around that area. I also interviewed the rare goblins, but to my surprise, I couldn't see the statuses of Gi Gu, Gi Go, and Gi Za. Which goes to say that these goblins will also promote to a new class soon. It shouldn't take much longer for them to reach the noble class. But compared to them, although Gi and Gi have been steadily accumulating levels, their growth is still far slower than mine. I guess I'll have to focus on them. I continued the interviews until the sun was high up the sky. And after interviewing mostly half of the warriors of the settlement, around 40 goblins, I ended the interview for the day. I might have overdone it actually. In today's interview, what caught my attention the most were the throw-type skills. When it comes to fighting orcs and other monsters that specialize in close combat, the most effective way of fighting them is to fight them from afar, dealing damage to them while not taking any ourselves. The druids may be able to learn magic, but having the other goblins do the same thing is quite difficult. So instead I want them to learn those throw-type skills. Skills that let them throw projectiles. I could gather all those that can throw projectiles, and have them form a group, but, what should I do? The current 3-man cell works by having one goblin lure the enemy, while another goblin breaks the opponent's stance. And then with the opponent's stance broken, the two goblins are pin the opponent down to let the third goblin kill the enemy effortlessly. This is the current pattern, so the question is, how will the 3-man cell operate once I mix long-range support like the druids with that? I don't know. Or at least, I don't have anything certain yet. In any case, I need a change of pace. After finishing the interview, I got myself some food, and went to the prison. "I'm entering," I said. As I entered the prison, the grey wolf pups and the kobold followed me, frolicking by my feet. "F. Fluffy," muttered Retia. "C. Cute," muttered another. Reshia's and Lily's eyes were sparkling. Lily would normally just hide behind Reshia and not talk to me, but today she's giving me the armor I asked her to adjust. I've adjusted the armor. Here, said Lily with an uncomfortable expression. The materials are armor rabbit and shape alligator. The armor she made for me before got too small, so I asked her to fix it. Taking the armor from her hands, I wore it to try it out, and it fit perfectly. It fits perfectly. Thank you. Just when I thought she was about to shake in fear, she shook her head instead. I need to give you a reward of some sort. Any requests? She performed better than expected. I should spoil her a little. But then Reshia suddenly interjected, saying, then in that case, some more food. And I curtly replied, not you. Ignored, Reshia puffed up her cheeks, and Lily answered, then in that case, I'd like to have an opportunity to swing my sword. What's going on? I wondered. At the same time, I snuck a glance at Reshia, only to see that she was surprised too. So she doesn't know anything either, huh? I concluded. You want to fight with us? I asked. What are you thinking, Lily? What's with the sudden change of heart? I want to move my body, she replied. Is that really all there is to it? What's hidden behind those eyes of yours, Lily? But, this is a good opportunity. If you just want to move your body, then I'll have you spar with the goblins. I don't know what Lily is hoping for, but this is a good opportunity to gather experience when fighting against the humans that are called adventurers. And I might even solve the problem with the 3-man cells if she seriously helps out. Understood. With that curt reply, her sparring days were decided. Right after lunch, I had Lily in a nearby 3-man cell unit spar. Reshia might be able to heal them, but it's still too dangerous to play around with a real weapon. So I prepared wooden swords and wooden spears with rounded ends for the spar. Now I wonder what's going to happen. Lily hasn't held a sword in a while, so I let her warm up for a bit first, while I kept Reshia away. And then the mock battle began. Start. At my call, the mock battle began. The first ones to move were the goblins. Following the essentials when hunting their prey, the 3-man cell unit slowly approached Lily from scattered directions as they tried to surround her. Lily held the wooden sword tightly in front of her as she measured the distance. As the 3-man cell unit surrounded Lily in a triangle, roaring voices bellowed, and the 3 goblins attacked Lily at the same time. A 3-pronged attack, but Lily remained calm. When being attacked from 3 directions, one only needs to move toward a single direction to break the triangle formation. And of course the goblins were expecting Lily to break through from the front, but betraying their expectations, she moved the other way instead. The opponent was right in front of her, yet she chose to show her back, and faced the other way. By doing so, she betrayed the expectations of the goblin, and she ended up facing the very goblin whose duty was to defeat her from the back. That movement caused the goblins to stop momentarily, and in that short opening, her sword passed by the flank of the goblin in front of her cleanly. A splendid clean strike, I thought. Then immediately following the first strike, she spun and struck at the panicked goblin that was now behind her. The goblin fell, and the remaining 2 stopped in their tracks, frozen. But Lily showed no mercy. Sure. With a cry of fighting spirit, Lily moved her body, and struck at one of the 2 remaining goblins. The goblin was somehow able to block the wooden sword attacking from below, but the following attack from above was unexpected, and he couldn't help but let the wooden sword in his hand slip. And in the next instant, the goblin was retired. 2 of the goblins were down for the count. The only remaining one, the one in the front whose duty was to keep Lily from moving. But without even so much as a challenge, the mock battle ended. Spectacular, I praised. And as if she was the one fighting, Reshia puffed her chest up. For some reason though, the gray wolf pups were hugging her. Seeing that I couldn't help but wonder, when did she win them over? Then Reshia said, but of course, after all, she did study under the Zweil style in the capital. After defeating the 3 goblins, Lily dedicated her sword towards Reshia. A knight's ceremony. But that seemingly natural act to them was truly like those of the drawings on the olden scrolls. All the more so with the beautiful features of a young woman such as hers. Then all of a sudden, Gi Go kneeled before me as he called out to me. Chief, he said. If it be possible, please grant unto me the opportunity to wash away this shame. Hearing that, a gleam of understanding flashed through my eyes. And I thought to myself, so those goblins were from his village. Since Gi Go and Gi Gu were both former leaders of their respective villages, they were able to naturally form unity amongst the members of their former villages. In other words, it's what you would call a faction. Nothing's happened yet so far, but I might have to think of some measures or ways to deal with them in the future. In any case, it's nothing urgent for now. Gi Go, I said, calling out to the kneeling goblin before me. Yes, chief, he replied. Why do you think they lost? I asked. Because they were weak, he curtly replied. Well, he's not wrong. Then what should be done in order to win? I asked again. And without any hesitation, he replied, numbers. Numbers, huh? That might work here, but eventually, that method will reach its end. So I told him, think of a way to defeat humans with only 3 goblins. From now on, I want these goblins to start thinking by themselves. It's about time they stopped relying on me so much. Think by yourself, and make your own decisions. If you can't do that, then it'll be difficult to survive the coming battles where our lives are at stake. As Gi Go was about to leave, I stopped him, and said, don't punish the 3 goblins that just lost, all right. Understood, he said, bowing his head deeply, before going back to his own place. Well, well. Things have taken quite an interesting turn, haven't they? Now I wonder who will think up a good method first. For that let's go and stir up some rivalry. Lily, can you fight one more time? I asked. No problem, she replied as she let her wooden sword sing with a swing. This girl might just be a godsend. As I thought that, I called out to Gi Gu. Gi Gu, I said. Yes, he replied. Pick 3 goblins from your faction and have them form a unit. Gi Gu bowed, and he picked a 3-man cell from his faction, and had them fight Lily. I did the same for the other factions, and in the end, not one of the factions could put up a good fight. Of course, with the condition that the goblin rares above can't fight. Then seeing the time, I ordered the goblins to hunt. We'll be continuing this for a while. But for now, go and hunt until the sun sets. After this we'll repeat these mock battles a lot. Now, I wonder who amongst the goblins will be the first to break from his shell. Grey wolves, LV1, have been tamed. Note. I don't know Luna's gender as it wasn't specified. But Luna or Ryuna sounds like a girl's name, so I'll treat her as a goddess for now. Volume 1, Chapter 30. Fortress of the Abyss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Race, Goblin, Level, 60, Class, Duke, Horde Chief, Possessed Skills, Divine Protection, Goddess of the Underworld, Altesia, Attributes, Darkness, Death, Subordinate Beasts, Kobold, LV9, Grey Wolf, LV1, X2, Abnormal Status. Having wanted to move her body, Lily became the sparring partner of the goblins. It's been 5 days since then. As expected, the first one to defeat her was Gi Za's faction. Magic was prohibited, but the druids were originally a class that's used to using their heads. And after continuous research through trial and error, they eventually found Lily's weakness. The other factions tried to emulate what Gi Za's faction did, but in the end they couldn't defeat Lily. Perhaps it might be for the best after all to form teams with the druids as the center. However, the druids aren't without fault. Their personalities for one are far too dry, and they have a tendency to look at their fellow goblins as chess pieces even more than I do. It's good that they're passionate about researching and studying, but I've gone to great trouble to bring together this army I have today. Having that army weakened because of their whims would be a shame. In the end, thinking by myself just ends with me running around in circles like this, leaving me at a loss. Then with the end of the afternoon training, I called out to Lily. Lily, I said. Thinking it'd be interesting to hear what she thought of her sparring partners, I asked her for her thoughts. And she replied, which group was the hardest to beat, you say? A questioning look appeared on her face. You don't mind trusting me, she asked. I'm just asking for your opinion, I replied. Come on, don't hold back. Let me hear what you think. Seeing a deep crevice appear in between her eyebrows, I quietly thought to myself, what a serious woman. As you'd expect, it's Gi Za's group, she answered. Well, that's about right. And next would be Gi's group, she continued. Oh. That's slightly unexpected. It's not Gi's faction who has a high level, but rather the beast warrior, Gi's faction, that she found second strongest. Gi's faction is currently serving as the vanguard in the group when moving out, responsible for detecting the enemies ahead. I've been having the beasts work in one big group, but it might be a good idea to start having them as a part of the three-man cells. Then while I was lost in my thought, I noticed Lily sneak a glance at me. What? I asked. Lily being quite tall, our heights were nearly the same. It's nothing, she curtly replied, averting her eyes as she did. I wanted to ask her what it was, but without enough material, I couldn't pursue the matter. Well, it doesn't really matter. If she's scheming something, then I'll just have to appropriately punish her. Then suddenly, a voice called out to me. King, it said. And using that opportunity, I left Lily. Do you know of the Fortress of the Abyss? Asked Gi Za. What is that? I asked back as I knitted my brows. It's only natural that you don't know about it, but it's a stronghold with many influential goblin clans, he answered. The sudden jump from fortresses to goblin clans baffled me. Gordab, Gaidga, Barajua, Ganra. Starting from these four clans along with all the goblins in the world, save for the humans, the goblins are probably the most numerous, he said. Gordab. Gaidga. What is he talking about? But these four clans aren't united. Of course, they don't like the humans, but they also carry ill will for their fellow goblins, he continued. As Gi Za began to prattle, I decided to keep quiet and listen. As for why? It's because Gi Za's eyes carried with it the same will, the same resolve when fighting. But there is one thing that they have in common, he said, in other words, if I want to unify the goblins, I have to aim for that fortress, is what he's saying. The Fortress of the Abyss, he declared. Why is a fortress a common point, I wondered. If you go, you'll know, said Gi Za. His eyes remained unchanging, carrying with it the same resolve it did throughout his entire story. You want me to put my trust in that? I asked him. Then, as if carrying the dignity of a prophet, Gi Za's words brimmed with madness in his fervor as he answered me, saying, King, if you are to lead us, goblins, then, so this is what means to be speechless. I thought. That place is our home. It is the home to which every goblin must return to. And as such, if I wish to rule over the goblins, then I need to aim for that, the home of goblins. The Fortress of the Abyss. Those words carried with it a mysterious sound, resounding within me. It's certainly something to stir one up. Even Gi Za, who's normally so calm, has gotten this passionate over it. Or does that place actually have a big impact to everyone else except for me? But even then. Why now? I asked. As thanks for before, he replied. Thanks. It's thanks for showing me something interesting, grinned Gi Za. If he's talking about the Grey Wolves, then he's mistaken. That wasn't something like that. But. And where is that fortress? I asked. I don't know how much effect that fortress has on the goblin clans and the scattered goblins, but if I can use that to gather them, then it's not a bad move. Whether I make that fortress mine, whether I use it, or crush it, I'll do whatever it takes to build my kingdom. Deep in the forest, to the west. A distance of 10 days from here, answered Giza. West. The orcs should be there. West, huh? I muttered. Giza nodded at my muttering. It seems he understands what I'm thinking. The orcs must be dealt with. The fortress is the first gate they need to pass, said Giza. The orcs. There's a debt that needs to be paid. I guess I'll have you pay up, orcs. I'll have you pay for attacking my village before. But first, I need to train my goblins. They need to become strong enough to defeat the orcs as 3-man cells. What are you planning? I asked. And the king answered me without even so much as looking back, saying, I'm saving them. The children of the same grey wolves who tried to kill you. Even though these might grow to become stronger than you one day. I inquired. As the king embraced the grey wolves in his chest, his eyes narrowed, and he answered back, saying, if so, then I shall respond in kind with all of my power. Be it vengeance, be it treason. I mind neither. If there is someone that wishes to stand before me, then I shall receive him as king. Why? Why are you going so far? Going so far as to even raise the child of someone who might become your enemy. The same goes for you, Giza, continued the king, shooting a sharp glance at me that caused my body to quiver at the coldness of those eyes. If you wish to defeat me, he declared. Then come. I'll gladly welcome you any time. When I heard those words, I couldn't help but let out a laugh. What is it? Asked the king. Nah, it's nothing. I'm coming with you, I replied. As I followed the king's back, I recalled the time when I was banished from the village that would later become the village of the goblin druids. When the boss of the horde then found out that I was a druid, he rallied all of the goblins, and he banished me from the village. The only one who protected me then was my old man. But in the end, even he could not go against the boss. Chased by the horde, I barely escaped with my life. But I toiled, founded a new horde, and in the end I was able to reclaim the place I once lost. But then my old man appeared before me again. He was the one who taught me words. The benefactor responsible for my evolution into a druid. But at the same time, I also couldn't forget the hate I bore. And I asked him, why now? I asked. Why do you have to appear before me now? And he replied, the king has come. I couldn't believe my ears. The king, that fabled figure spoken of only in the bedtime tales. He's saying that such a being has appeared. He who will unify the goblins. The deliverer who shall deliver us into a land of peace. Impossible, I scornfully laughed. But the old man's gaze was earnest. Then in that case, let me test him, I said. Holding my favorite staff in my hand, I laughed, fully aware that I'm merely bluffing as I said, if he is a king, a true king, then. As I hid a magic gem in my chest for my trump card, a whirlpool of wind blew at the tip of my staff. Defeat me. But should I win, then I shall lead the horde and take the fortress of the abyss for myself. For I, who have gathered the druids, am also fitting to be king. Author's note. New information and Giza's recollection in other words. Note. As I mentioned before, the author switches to different characters to indicate and his characters are becoming more beastly. The first italic is to show that the protagonist spoke in katakana for a moment.